Joining me now is Judi Garrett, and Judy has quite a bit of experience working in law enforcement in the prison system, right? Judy, can you give us a bit of your background?
Sure. I was first introduced to the criminal justice system right after college. I took a job as a correctional officer at Western Wayne Correctional Facility outside Detroit, Michigan. To give you an idea, I was 20. I had braces. I'm about 5'3" and a half, 115 pounds. Wore my hair in a ponytail. Walked into that facility of six to 700 men serving everything from 5 years to natural life. It was quite an experience. It was a great year. I learned a lot, put my parents through a lot of stress and strain. Then went on to law school. After law school, clerked for a judge who suggested I look at a job at the Department of Justice. Took a job with the Federal Bureau of Prisons, where I started in the honors program as an attorney, then moved my way up through the agency to become assistant director for information policy and public affairs. I spent a total of about 29 years with the Bureau of Prisons. I think the last 10, I was assistant director. That was a great job because it gave me the perspective of the entire criminal justice system, both federal and state, working with the White House and the Hill and judges, policymakers, advocates about every issue you can possibly imagine. But it also allowed me to be very involved in the day-to-day operations of the Bureau of Prisons, whether it is population projections or research on the effectiveness of our programs, policies regarding private prisons, how much we should spend on substance abuse treatment, you name it. So I
Wow.
had a phenomenal career. Yeah.
What a background. I like the fact too that you worked in the prison, but also have a law degree and the experience of working with public affairs, which a lot
Right.
of times you don't have the public affairs or the media relations type of side of a job, and that can be critical, especially when there's kind of a negative stigma, I think, for a lot of people when it comes to the prison system. Did you find that as far as in your career experiencing that people would look at the prison system and think, oh, they're all bad guys, lock them up, horrible conditions. And how did you deal with those type of thoughts that people had?
It's really unfair and unfortunate. I know why people have that perspective. When you look at the media, prison guards, as they're often referred to, are typically depicted as not very smart, not very sophisticated, often subject to corruption. Whereas whether it's the US Marshal Service or the FBI or the cops on the street are the heroes. And it's very unfair and very inaccurate. People who work in corrections are some of the most compassionate, smart, innovative people you will find in law enforcement. It takes an awful lot to walk through those gates every day. You are locked in with the incarcerated population. You don't have any weapons. All you have is your ability to communicate with people and work with people and navigate difficult situations, often by yourself. Typically, staff are in a housing unit with 250 inmates. That's it, you and them. So it's a tough job. It's a tough job, and I wish people understood more about what it was like inside prison because I think it would give them a much better perspective. In terms of how it was for me, I spent a lot of time trying to make that case and trying to explain to folks why they should fund prisons, why they should support prison staff, why they should give us the resources that we needed so that both staff and inmates could live in a positive environment, which exists in a lot of prisons, contrary to what you see in the media.
Right. I tell you what, my eyes were open about 3 weeks ago. I went through an Idaho prison and they had a wood shop in there where inmates were making beautiful wooden doors, the floor. They had a license plate facility where they were making the license plates. They were cooking. They were in school. They actually had classrooms and a library. Rather than what we do see in the movies, where it's fights and hardened people, uh, arguing with each other. So yeah, I get what you're saying there. A lot of people become really focused too on these high profile inmates, like here in Idaho, Brian Koberger. There was a video leaked of him in his cell walking back and forth. And I know some of the comments were, he's in such a huge cell. Why is he given royal treatment? Can you walk us through what it's like for prison administrators, not necessarily in this case, but just in general, when you get a high profile inmate, how do you handle somebody like that?
Those are very difficult cases. Nobody wants them at all because it is just a headache and stress and worry. You need to keep them safe from themselves, from others. You need to keep other people safe from them potentially. You want to manage the perception of the media, of the legislators, or the policymakers. So it's just a headache. Prison administrators want to just run their facility in peace, right? They don't need everybody's thoughts and opinions and advice. But when you have somebody like that, you get everybody's opinion and insight. It's very challenging. When you have somebody like that, who you have to isolate from the rest of the inmate population, at least for a time, for their safety and everyone else's safety, it's difficult because there's no situation under which somebody can be kept apart from the population and not suffer from that in a way. When you are pulled away from everybody, that's punishment. That's prison in and of itself. Now you have to put them in a prison inside a prison. That person then has everything brought to them as opposed to them being able to go out and participate in the communal life because prison is a community. Now you're pulling that person out of that community. So it takes a lot of staff resources and a lot of planning to bring everything to them so that they can function within their individual cell typically, which is how it works. When they come out of the cell, you typically have 2 or 3 staff with them, depending on the person, again, for their protection, for everyone else's protection. So it's sucking up a lot of staff resources to care for this one individual. And nobody wins. Everybody is being beat up for the way they're doing it. As you said, they're giving them too much. One side. The other side said, you're not giving them too much. It's inhumane. They're in solitary confinement. It's not right. There's no easy answers. There's no great way to do it where you can satisfy all the different constituents. But in fact, it's done very similarly in every institution around the country. It's easier if the facility is designed for that kind of a situation, which most aren't. And it's just never easy.
Yeah, and when it comes to getting them back and forth between like court hearings, if you have to take them off site and get them to a courthouse and transport them, we saw it a little bit with the Luigi Mangione in New York case. What type of preparation and training goes into that? Because you would hate for someone to, you know, fire a gun at them or hurt them in the process. You still have to protect them, even though everyone might hate them. They still have their rights. What goes into that?
Those are some of the highest risk situations. Nobody likes them. There have been Bureau of Prison staff killed on inmate escort trips and others around the country, I'm sure. It is a very scary situation, and my hat's off to everybody that pulls it off, whether it's the staff doing the escort or the staff planning it. Um, it's dangerous, and everybody knows as much as you try to do it secretly, times that people aren't aware, routes that people aren't aware, especially in this day and age, there are no secrets. So people are aware, people know, people are waiting for you, and it's terrifying. Staff typically wear stab resistant vests, but in situations like that, they're going to be wearing bullet resistant vests because now you're out in the community and it's not just knives and shanks. You're worrying about bullets as well. So yes, we're worried about the person we're transporting, but we're worried about those staff also because they're putting their lives on the line to get this person back and forth to where they need to be. It's wonderful now that we have as much technology as we do so that we can limit those sorts of visits. And so we can do much more over video conferencing. That is saving lives every day where we are not having to pull people out of the institution going back and forth to the court. Of course, we need to make sure we are respecting people's rights of access to counsel and all that and not interfering with their right to due process. But as much as possible, if we can do those things over video technology, it's really phenomenal.
Yeah. And that's what happened a few weeks ago with the Tyler Robinson case in Utah, the man accused of shooting Charlie Kirk. One of the things, Judy, that seems to come with a lot of these high profile cases, I mentioned Luigi Mangione in New York. He has supporters, a lot of them. What type of mail are the prisons getting for these high profile cases, a lot of women that might like the inmate, or men, both, if it's a
Yeah.
female client or even a male client. How do you handle that? I mean, in general, what do the administrators have to do? Do you have to hand them over their mail? Is it all technically theirs, or how are things like that dealt with?
Mail is a really scary area also because over the past several decades, the use of the mails to facilitate the introduction of contraband has become much more elevated in terms of risk. The types of drugs that are coming in through the mail that are so dangerous with just a little bit of exposure, what happens to people. Typically, mail would be opened, scanned, read, reviewed, shake out the envelope, etc., before given over to the inmate. Over the past maybe 10 years or so, it's become much more commonplace to have no paper delivered to inmates. So mail is sent off site, it is scanned in, it is digitized, and the inmates receive it on their tablet or a kiosk
Oh,
through
well.
their version of email, so that all they get is a scanned version of the mail. Now, that is not true for legal mail, that's just the general mail. There are other
Right.
ways that folks do that as well. Sometimes they just photocopied essentially and give them a photocopied paper of the mail as opposed to a digitized email. But in any way possible, we correctional administrators try to limit the introduction of an actual piece of paper that someone on the outside is sending inside, because how easy it is to soak that paper in drugs or whatever it might be to get things into the institution. So yes, the mail is received unless there's some reason not to, meaning it has inappropriate content or threatening content or images or whatever it is. The mail is received, all of it, um, but not necessarily in the same form in which it was sent. Does that make
Right.
sense?
Yeah. It's interesting you say that about the paper, and there's going to be people that are going to be like, I never would have thought of that. I thought the same thing with peanut M&Ms. Peanut M&Ms are not allowed in because you could put something, at least here in some of our facilities,
Mm-hmm.
in the M&M, whereas plain M&Ms are allowed in. You could replace the nut with something I never would have thought of, but I'm sure you've seen it all.
The creativity will blow your mind. It
Right.
is just absolutely unbelievable. But as you said, when you go through prisons, especially the hobby craft area, some of the recreation areas, or even the work sites, and you see the capacity of people, their creativity, their skill, the genius, it's heartbreaking, but it also is a reminder of when all those skills and abilities are used for nefarious purposes, you can do a lot of harm. So when you have a lot of time on your hands, a lot of creativity, and a lot of smarts, you can come up with some incredible ways of introducing contraband or beating the system generally.
Right. Judy, I want to ask you, over the course of your career, did the thought process change about keeping people in solitary confinement? And I would imagine there were many discussions about mental health with inmates. How did that evolve? How did that change? And kind of where are we today with a lot of these prisons?
It is a perennial topic. It has been discussed certainly since when I started in corrections many years ago. And again, as I said, it's very challenging to remove somebody from the general population and figure out how to manage their day-to-day existence. Ideally, it's used for a short term. So it's a form of punishment. If you misbehave, we're going to pull you out and give you a timeout and then take you back and then allow you back in. So it's a form of punishment for 10 days, 15 days, 30 days. It's uncomfortable, it's unpleasant, not going to do anybody, I don't think anybody believes any real harm short term. You might also be pulled out short term if you're having a mental health episode, or if you've been victimized and we need to protect you. Maybe we're going to then move you to another institution, but hopefully not keep you by yourself long term. There are cases, however, where people need to be kept by themselves long term, either because of the nature of the offense that they committed, or because of something that they've done in prison, or maybe something that's been done to them in prison. There are situations where people are going to be kept aside, isolated, if you will, for long periods of time. There was a movement in the late 80s, early 90s, to create more of these supermax facilities, which are essentially institutions where everybody is kept in isolation. The Bureau of Prisons retrofitted a facility in Marion, Illinois in the late 1980s to be sort of a temporary supermax. And then we built a new supermax in Florence, Colorado. It is designed to house people essentially in their cells for 23 hours a day for as many years as they need to remain in that status. There is an opportunity to step down for some people as they demonstrate that they can conform and behave safely. So as long as those facilities have existed, as long as we've been keeping people isolated for longer periods of time, there's been debate about the mental health impact of it. There have been a variety of studies, some of which claim to show that it has very deleterious effects on people's mental health. The biggest problem with those studies is, to what are you comparing? We are not comparing the impact of somebody being held in isolation in prison versus somebody being out in the community. That would be a ridiculous comparison. We shouldn't even compare it to what it's like in most open movement institutions, in open movement facilities, because the people that are held in those very restricted environments have demonstrated an inability to behave in those environments. So their mental capacity is somewhat different, their mental health, their way of thinking. Or people who have just committed such horrific crimes that we don't believe we can safely house them in the general population. So I think the problem with a lot of the studies is the comparison group, the standard to which they are comparing impact, the impact on people's mental health to which they are attributing being isolated.
Right.
The reason that we should be skeptical of some of these studies is because the notion that someone is isolated is really not an accurate depiction of what life is like when you are held in a segregated or restricted housing unit. You are not away from all people all the time. You have staff visiting you on a daily basis, more than one staff member. You have an opportunity once a month, whatever it might be, to interact with people on the outside. You have opportunities to get mail, as you were saying. Often you have opportunities to do learning classes over closed circuit television programs. You are being interacted with, spoken to, provided for all hours of the day and night by staff members. You are not mixing and mingling with the general population. That is true. But we use that sort of special housing, restrictive housing, only when necessary to protect people's lives, essentially. An argument could be made that there are times it is a form of punishment. That may be true, but it has to be very, very severe because staff and prison administrators don't like keeping people in those restrictive environments. It's extremely expensive. It's extremely staff intensive. So we use it sparingly. And generally for people for whose mental health, mental state is already not in line with the general population, I would say.
Right.
And that's not always blaming them. There are times where things have happened to them. But as correctional administrators, you sort of take it as it is presented to you. And then you do the best that you can to provide them with a safe, secure, humane environment, as well as maintain the safety and security of everybody else in the institution, staff, inmates, and then the general public.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, like you said, the vast majority, at least from my observations in the Idaho prisons, are out in general population associating with people day in, day out. It's those that have lost that privilege because of their own behavior that are moved in most cases to isolation. I'm familiar with somebody even on death row here in Idaho who was able to have a religious person go in and meet with them and give them pamphlets and scriptures and whatnot. So it seems like the percentage overall of those in isolation would be very minor. But I would imagine nationwide, there's got to be a shortage, like there is on the outside world, of mental health experts. I mean, it'd be great if every single inmate could have their own therapist, but there simply aren't the resources for that.
That's true. In terms of numbers, it's typically less than 1%. of inmates who are held in a restricted housing environment long term. In terms of spiritual guidance, that is a very frequent event for inmates who are held in restricted housing. They are provided spiritual counseling, guidance, religious people come and meet with them very often. In terms of mental health providers, they also get an inordinate amount of mental health providers visiting them, checking on them, speaking to them. They don't always want to engage, but it is made available to them
Yeah.
on a much, much higher basis than inmates in the general population. So they are given many, many more resources than anybody else would receive, and those resources are brought to them. So as opposed to inmates in the general population, you feel sick, you go to the doctor, you feel that you need to talk to a counselor, therapist, psychologist, you take it upon yourself. For individuals who are held in the restrictive housing units, everybody is brought to them to check on them, to get an affirmative. You don't want to speak to a counselor, you don't need a therapist, so that people are consistently and constantly getting a read on how they are doing. And it's a much higher level of service than other individuals get in a prison environment.
Judy, what would you say over the course of your career? What's one of the main things you learned working with the prison system, working in the legal justice system that the public may not be aware of or may have a misconception of? Like when you hear something, having been in there, are you like,
Yeah.
wait, that's not quite right?
Well, it usually starts when people don't believe that I was a correctional officer in a male institution when I was 20 with braces. How
Right.
could you possibly have? How many guns did you carry? No, I didn't carry any guns. How many people were with you to help you and protect you? Nobody, because corrections is a people business. The number of staff versus inmates in any prison on any given day would really surprise people. So if you have a prison with 1,000 inmates, the number of staff working on a shift is going to be far less than 100. In a housing unit, you might have one correctional officer with 250 inmates. And no weapons inside, obviously, no weapons at all, because the inmates would be able to take the weapons from the staff
Yeah.
at any point, right? So when you hear that, what people should begin to understand is it's a business that depends on communication. It depends on people's ability to interact effectively with other people. If you don't do that well, you won't make it in corrections. When you're interacting with people on a continual, ongoing basis, you start to develop relationships with people and you see them as human beings, which is exactly what we would want in a prison environment. That's how prisons are able to function, as a matter of fact. The staff member know all the inmates by name. They know something about their story and their family and their job and everything else, because that just is what happens when you are working side by side with people all day, every day. Inmates allow staff to supervise them. If they didn't, there would be a disturbance every day. Inmates want prisons to run safely and securely and in an orderly manner for everybody's safety and security. So staff and inmates have a lot in common when they're inside those fences, walls, gates every day in terms of how they want things to go. There are certainly differences. Inmates are looking to beat the system all the time, and staff are looking to prevent them from doing so. They don't want them to harm one another. They don't want to introduce contraband. But in terms of the day-to-day operations, nobody wants things to be disrupted. When things are disrupted, inmates stay in their cell. They don't go to the chow hall. They don't go to work. They don't go to classes. They don't go to recreation. So nobody wants that. Everybody wants the institutions to operate smoothly. And I think people on the outside really don't understand that at all. A prison's a city, right? Everybody has their job in the city, whether it's in medical or education or recreation or whatever it is. Everybody has their job, everybody has their role, everybody wants it to run smoothly. For the most part, correctional staff are very compassionate, hardworking, dedicated folks. They understand very well that 97, 98% of people in prison are coming out one day, going back to their families, going back to their jobs. They want to see them succeed. They understand that they are more likely to succeed when they leave if they're treated as human beings while they're inside. And by the way, if they get a skill, if they get an education, if they deal with their substance abuse, everybody understands that. And for the most part, everybody's working towards that common goal. And so when you walk through prisons, you see people talking to each other, interacting with one another. You don't see hostility and um, degrading behavior and all that. It's very unusual, even in the high security institutions.
Right. Very helpful, Judy. I appreciate your insight. Is there anything that you want to add?
No, I don't think so. I think it's really wonderful that prisons are letting people come in now more and see and gain some understanding of what it's like. Because the reality is, I think we are always going to have prisons. They're a very important part of our criminal justice system. And if we would fund them well, and if we had good people to come work there, they would become even better places. And we wouldn't have as much use of restrictive housing segregation, and we would have better programs and better education, and it that benefits everybody. So kudos to everybody that's working in facilities. Kudos to people that have an interest, whether it's reporters like you or people that just want to come in and see. We need to all be supportive of what you noted right now is a difficult time because they're hurting for staff just like law enforcement are around the country. And that's difficult. You have staff working overtime a lot, being told, no, you can't go home to your family. We need you to stay for the next shift so that we can keep the institution operating. That's really difficult. And we need more good people to come work at our institutions to avoid that kind of thing. So
Yeah.
that's about it. Thank you.